Hello. For quite a few years now, I've been using an iPad as a director's monitor from my A-cam, and it's worked really well. Although I won't tell you what transmitter I was using because it's getting a bit old now and it's got a few issues. So you can imagine my excitement when Sony announced that the new FX9 would have Wi-Fi streaming built right in, with camera control. And then imagine our disappointment when we all realised it was 480p at 1 megabyte per second. So not really usable as a director's monitor. It's great for camera control, but the picture's barely good enough for framing. Why do they do that? Why does Sony keep leaving stuff out? Hey Google, why does Sony keep crippling new cameras?
Sony like to stuff their cameras up a bit, because it means you'll buy more, and they're absolute plonkers.
Ta-da! Luckily, a company called Hollyland got in touch, and they offered to send me one of their Mars 400S wireless units just to test. And of course, I said yes. Now Hollyland make a lot of wireless transmission systems for the film and TV industry, but I don't think I'm being unfair when I say this Mars 400S system is at the value end of their range. The packaging doesn't look cheap though. You get a transmitter, a receiver, mains unit and some various clamps and cables for mounting it to the camera. Nicely packaged. The design of the actual units looks really good. I wouldn't call it overly stylish, but it's workmanlike and looks like it does the job. And they feel metal. Both the transmitter and the receiver look visually identical, with HDMI inputs and outputs and BNC for SDI inputs and outputs. They have the same power connectors, on-off switch and even mounting holes on the bottom. Both the transmitter and the receiver can also be powered from the Sony NPF style batteries, which is useful if you need a standalone solution. I think these look and feel very professional. And then I started to wonder about what's the best way to review them. And the first thing I looked at was my own priorities when I'm buying kit like this. Number one, top of my list, is reliability. I just want to be able to turn it on and for it to work quickly as possible. I don't want to spend time setting it up, selecting channels, anything like that. Turn it on and forget about it. Second priority, latency. How much of a delay is there between the transmitter and the received picture? If that gets too long, that does wind up directors. And finally, range. How far away can you get before the picture starts to break up and again winds everybody up? So looking at those in turn, let's see how long it takes to get a visible signal through the link. I started a timer going on the transmitter on the left and the receiver on the right. It takes a little while to boot up, find a free channel and then start streaming. But all of that seems to take about 20 seconds for the transmitter. And then we've got a usable picture in about 24 seconds from the receiver. Very impressive. So the next thing I want to test is the latency. Now I normally run at 25 frames a second because I'm still in Europe, at least geographically. I'm sorry if you normally run at a different frame rate, but at least this will give you some idea of the delay. If I plug an SDI monitor directly by cable into the camera, and the camera is pointing at some time code, we can see if there's any delay in the signal leaving the camera. And this is where my test went all strange. I did expect a little delay. Even SDI has to code and then decode a full HD signal, but I was shocked to see this is almost 3 frames out of my FX9, and I've never really noticed that before. Anyway, let's turn on the Hollyland transmitter and include another SDI monitor receiving the time code from the Hollyland receiver. Well, that almost exactly doubles the delay. But that's not bad. It's actually much better than I expected using Wi-Fi. Now most manufacturers will quote amazing latency figures, but it's really difficult to understand what that means in reality. The Mars 400S system is quoted as 0.1 of a second, and I suppose 3/25ths of a second is pretty close, especially when you consider how long it takes to code and decode an SDI signal. So at this point, I thought I'd see if the delay was worse inputting HDMI into the transmitter. You'd think it would be, But no, it's almost exactly the same as SDI. It's really useful being able to convert both ways between SDI and HDMI or HDMI to SDI on both the transmitter and the receiver. Being able to send an SDI signal to an HDMI monitor, now that's really useful. So does everything slow down when I add a mobile device? Let's try an iPhone 11 Pro. Wow, exactly the same total delay as the Hollyland receiver using SDI, which is a total of about 6 frames from the camera. That's really impressive and totally usable. But what about adding a really old iPad that hasn't been updated in years? Well, that's odd. It's actually quicker than everything else, even the Hollyland receiver. Don't you just love it when a test doesn't go the way you expect? And strangely, the fastest thing I've got is this really old iPad. But whatever you choose to use, having just a 6-frame delay is really impressive. Even more so when you think that 3 of those frames have been lost when you use an SDI cable. To give you some idea of how that compares to the previous system I was using, the one I won't talk about, this system is almost 3 times quicker. Now, testing the range is a little more difficult right now because we're all on lockdown. However, we do have an underground car park that's almost 300 feet long, and absolutely no problem for the Hollyland. In fact, I had to go up on a different floor before I lost the signal. Which isn't surprising because that's a lot of steel and concrete. I also left the camera outside and could see a picture 2 rooms away in the office. So looking at all those priorities I listed earlier, ease of setup and latency and range, this Hollyland Mars 400 system appears to meet them all really well. And it's certainly great value. So normally at this point in the video, during the sum up, I would be saying this is fantastic and you should definitely run out and buy one. But there's just one more thing you should be aware of. In fact, you might already be aware of it. I'm not for a minute suggesting that you'd normally put a microphone right above a camera when you're working, but for the sake of this demonstration, let's listen to the noise of the FX9. It has a fan in it that comes on when you first turn it on, but then goes quiet. Like that. Let's turn on the transmitter. And the receiver's got a fan in it as well. So moving the mic back out of the way, it does give you some idea of what this will actually sound like. Now normally you might not have the receiver running at the same time as the transmitter. You could be going to an iPad, and that's normally the way I would be working. So I can't really tell you if this is going to be a problem. And do all the advantages outweigh that disadvantage? I might be looking for a piece of foam to go over the top and cover up the vents a bit, or some way of quietening it down. It's such a shame that they don't have a larger fan moving slowly, maybe with bigger holes, or just a heat sink. There must be a way of cooling these in a quieter way. As it is, I think the pluses of the Mars 400S system do outweigh the minus. But whether it works for you, I can't really say. From my own point of view, I think it does work for me, although I might be finding a way of baffling the sound without stopping the airflow. So close.